Again, my name is Dave Walsh, and I'm going to speak today on the Build Clean proposal. The House bill is 1342, and the Senate bill is 5391. So this bill is a modeling, measuring, and reporting of greenhouse gas impacts for specific structural materials. So it only applies to some state-funded projects. It does not apply to any project that's privately funded. And you can see over on the right on the sidebar the types of projects that would be affected. It's projects that are larger than 50,000 square feet and funded through the following agencies or funding mechanisms. It applies only to specific wood, concrete, and steel structural products. So you can see structural concrete, steel reinforcement, structural steel, engineered wood, mass timber, and structurally sawn lumber. This bill is a little bit different than some of the other proposals in that it considers the lifetime impacts of structural materials, and it requires the design team to model those impacts over the entire lifespan of the building, not just the upfront carbon of A1 to A3 that would be in EPDs. Also importantly, this measures the impacts at the project level. And so this is important because there are some situations or some applications where a material may be above a specific reference baseline, but that can be offset in equal measure by other materials that are below that baseline. This is not unlike the process that happens, frankly, with project budgets, financial budgets, with you have a target, some are above the target, some are below, but overall, the project needs to meet its goal. This bill requires the collection and the public disclosure of greenhouse gas reductions and intensities of the structural materials. So beyond just collecting material quantities and the EPDs for the products in the project, this starts to build a better picture of what reductions are possible given specific materials, structural systems, and importantly, to understand what is the carbon intensity for different types of projects. This bill provides very specific funding for the creation of EPDs by Washington manufacturers. And while Washington does have a lot of EPDs, when you look a little bit closer, it's only in a few industries and often in the metropolitan markets. So those that do not have that have had that building, that business case to develop EPDs would benefit from this. And then finally, this bill does not set specific emission caps, which was the approach that was just talked about with the MBI proposal. So why do we feel that this is a good approach or a better approach even? And I think that procurement is extremely important and a very important tool to address embodied carbon, but the pivotal role of the design team is absolutely crucial. And so this is addressed in the bill by requiring that life cycle assessment, one life cycle assessment of the structure upfront in the design process. We also feel that this bill will provide project level data to help calibrate what emission cap should be. I think, frankly, today there's not adequate data on the project level to inform meaningful emission caps. And so when I look at some of the proposals, up and down the coast, frankly, some of them are frankly too lenient, or they're not workable in some real world applications. So the project level data that is collected by this bill will help to calibrate those future targets. As I mentioned, Build Clean goes beyond just collecting EPDs and quantities. It requires the calculation and the public reporting of estimated and actual emissions from the structural products, the actual reduction of embodied carbon of structural products, the carbon intensity, and importantly, that contextual information of, where is the project, what type of material, what kind of structural system, just so we can build a better picture of what is business as normal or usual and where we should be targeting. As I mentioned before, viewing this data at the project level helps for flexibility in ingredient sourcing. I think the last few years have taught us that supply chains can be fragile, and unfortunately, sometimes you need to switch. And so having the ability to compensate when you have an unavoided change is important. And then all the calculations, the quantities, the EPDs are required to be submitted to the state to help ensure rigor with this. So what does this require of the various stakeholders? Of the design team, stakeholders are required to conduct that LCA, early in schematic design or in schematic design. The design team is also required to clearly state the requirements for EPD submittals and calculations and disclosure in the specifications to help ensure accurate and fair bidding. And at the end of design, the design team will estimate the project emissions from the applicable materials and estimate a carbon intensity. For manufacturers and bidders, the bill requires them to produce product-specific EPDs, and that those EPDs be submitted to the general contractor. Initially, that submission would be at the end of the project, but after a phase-in period, those EPDs where feasible would be submitted at the time of buyout to help the general contractor, choose successful bidders not only on price, but on the carbon implication. For the general contractor, they're required to update the estimate from the design team on the estimated emissions with as-built quantities. And then at the end of the job, calculate and disclose the as-built project emissions of the covered products, the carbon reduction, and the carbon intensity, and to transmit to the state authority the EPDs and those calculations. And then for the state's role, their role would be to provide limited matching funding for Washington state manufacturers and to identify that public or nonprofit database. So just real briefly, we've worked hard to get a broad coalition supporting this. And so the following folks have publicly supported Build Clean. You can see folks from the design community and from carbon nonprofits, but also from the construction, building trades, and building manufacturer communities. So next steps, this is a very decisive week, frankly, on how things move forward. And so it would be awesome if you had thoughts or comments on this to submit them. Probably the easiest way to do that is to just Google Washington State bills. The bill information website from the state will pop up. And then you can just type in the number either 1342 or 1591, and that'll pull up a page where you can click on the comment on this bill.